Welcome to this epic explainer. Pull up a chair and get close to the fire, because today we're acting as storytellers. We're going to trace the entire sweeping legend of Game of Thrones, from its mythic dawn all the way to its bittersweet end, charting the ultimate struggle for power and survival in the lands of Westeros and Essos.
But before we start playing the Game of Thrones, we really need to understand what's actually at stake here. You see, as the author of this lore, George R.R. Martin reminds us, this is ultimately a story about the final climactic battle at Winterfell, with life itself hanging in the balance. All those political squabbles, they're really just a shadow cast against the icy backdrop of a much larger existential threat.
Part 1. The Age of Heroes, Myths, Magic, and the First Men. Let's journey back thousands of years to an era of absolute myth and magic. Think of this history in broad, sweeping strokes, where thousands of years pass in a single breath. We're talking 8,000 years before Aegon's conquest, when the devastating Long Night hits, followed by the Andal invasions. Slowly, this vast timeline starts to narrow down, compressing centuries, until we hit the vivid, incredibly violent reality of 298 AC, the exact year our main story kicks off. Back in those ancient days, Bran the Builder supposedly used ancient magic to construct the massive wall, cementing the Stark legacy at Winterfell just to keep the dead at bay. It's a literal feat of mythic engineering, and honestly, it brilliantly and tragically foreshadows the endgame for another boy named Bran.
Part 2. Kings, Dragons, and Rebellions, Forging the Iron Throne. As the myths fade into recorded history, we enter an age literally defined by fire and blood, where dragons met swords together to unite a continent. When Aegon the Conqueror arrived, he violently reshuffled the entire board. I mean, the mortality rate for ancient kings absolutely skyrocketed. House Hoare burned alive inside Harrenhal, House Gardner was completely wiped out on the Field of Fire, and House Durrandon fell in the Stormlands. In their ashes, Aegon raised up new great houses, the Greyjoys, the Tyrells, and the Baratheons, families that will eventually play our lethal game. So, the crucial takeaway for us here is that in Westeros, just like in human history, peace is really just a pause between wars. The Targaryen dynasty was plagued by decades of bitter Blackfire civil wars, which culminated in the unimaginably bloody Battle of the Red Grass Field. This endless cycle of violence eventually led to Robert's Rebellion, ending centuries of dragon rule, and setting the immediate stage for our story. Part 3, War of the Five Kings, the game begins. Our chronicle slows down quite a bit as we hit the year 298 AC. This is a moment in history where a single poisoned cup and a deadly secret shatter the realm entirely. Lord Eddard Stark discovers that King Robert's supposed heirs are actually the product of incest between Queen Cersei Lannister and her brother Jaime. And as we all know, Ned Stark's inability to navigate those treacherous, deceptive political waters of King's Landing costs him his head. That single execution ignites a vengeance-fueled war that burns across the entire continent. From that single execution, absolute chaos erupts. Suddenly, we have 5 kings, each firmly believing their claim is the only true one, actively tearing the realm apart. We've got the cruel Joffrey, the vengeful Robb Stark, the rigid Stannis, the charismatic Renly, and the purely opportunistic Balon Greyjoy. They are completely consumed by their petty wars, completely ignoring the terrifying storm gathering in the north. Because this isn't a war of honor or glory for the common soldier. It's a desperate scramble for survival. Just listen to Tyrion Lannister's terrifying battle cry at the Blackwater. He's rallying fearful men not for a king, but to protect their own homes from being burned and pillaged. In the grand tradition of storytelling, legends often diverge depending on who's actually singing the song. Some tales of the Blackwater speak of a single massive explosion of green wildfire that turns the tide. But older, more detailed chronicles describe a claustrophobic, swirling demon of green flame, a massive river chain trapping ships, and a mad slaughter across a literal bridge of burning, sinking decks. The staggering toll of this game is just absolute. Ancient, incredibly powerful families like the Tyrells and the Boltons were entirely snuffed out from history in a matter of a few bloody years. Meanwhile, House Stark endured horrific losses only to eventually reclaim Winterfell and achieve northern independence. The cost of power in this world is total destruction. Which brings us to the overarching question of our narrative. It's the ultimate tragic irony of this epic tale. What good is an Iron Throne? What good are all these crowns and castles when death itself comes marching from the freezing north to erase all human memory? Part 4.
The long night returns, the true threat. We must now turn our eyes back to the icy winds.
The petty wars are forced to pause as the mythic White Walkers breached a realm of the living once more. But across the world, a parallel legend was unfolding. Daenerys Targaryen's entire brutal journey through Essos, hatching dragons, liberating Slaver's Bay, assembling an army of Unsullied and Dothraki, was forging her into a weapon of fire. A weapon that arrives in Westeros, desperately needed, exactly as the ice of the long night finally spills over a fallen wall.
As the climax approaches, our bards start singing diverging songs. Some tales are rich with dark, apocalyptic magic involving Euron Greyjoy and dragon-binding horns. Other tellings focus on sheer trauma-driven survival, like Sansa Stark reclaiming the North. But regardless of the song being sung, both roads lead to the exact same darkness.
And the defense of Winterfell was an absolute nightmare of swirling darkness and fire. We see Melisandre's desperate magic igniting the trenches, Beric Dondarrion sacrificing his final life to save Arya Stark, and the fierce young Lyanna Mormont being crushed to death while bravely bringing down an undead giant. Beloved heroes were claimed as the army of the dead threatened to erase absolutely everything.
Then, in a moment that defines the legend, the mythic threat is resolved in an instant. With a single, desperate thrust of a Valyrian steel dagger, Arya Stark leaps from the darkness and shatters the Night King. His fall instantly disintegrates his entire army, halting the ultimate existential threat right at the brink of humanity's extinction.
Part 5. A bittersweet spring. The game concludes. But surviving the long night is not the end of our tale. We still must reckon with the surviving players of the game and the smoldering ashes of the Iron Throne itself. The story famously refuses to give us a simple, triumphant hero, constantly reminding us that the quest for ultimate power inherently corrupts. Daenerys' crusade ends in horrific fire, burning King's Landing and thousands of innocents. This tragedy forces Jon Snow to make an unthinkable, heartbreaking choice, assassinating the woman he loves to save the realm from a new tyrant. And so the wheel is finally broken. The Stark children, who we've followed from the very beginning, are scattered to the winds to find their own destinies. Jon is exiled to the true north, beyond the Wall. Sansa rules an independent north. Arya sails off into the unknown west, and Bran the Broken, the keeper of stories, is named king of the remaining 6 kingdoms.
This resolution perfectly encapsulates the essence of this vast lore. It is deeply, inherently bittersweet. It's completely devoid of neat fairy tale conclusions. The heroes survive, sure, but they are forever changed, forever separated, bearing the permanent scars of the world they fought to save.
As we close out this epic explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. We watch kings and queens burn an entire continent to ash for the privilege of sitting on an extremely uncomfortable metal chair. But in the brutal Game of Thrones, perhaps the only true prize was survival itself, living long enough through the darkest night just to dream of a spring. Thanks for gathering around the fire with me, and always keep questioning the stories you're told.